our next broadcast. This is Delhi. Our next broadcast follows.
This is All India Radio. You will now hear comments from the press. The Times of India, in its editorial titled Relook Needed, writes, at the recent Palkiwala Memorial Lecture, Vivek Debroy, chairman of the PM's Economic Advisory Council, rightly deplored Indian legislators' tendency to pass a law for every problem. This proclivity can lead to cures that are worse than the disease. And despite the NDA government promising minimum government, maximum governance, and committing to ease of living, this propensity to over-legislate remains. A prime example is the Citizenship Amendment Bill CAB that government is looking to introduce in the ongoing winter session of Parliament. The proposed legislation creates a path for Hindus and a few other denominations who have come from neighboring countries, but excluding Muslims, to obtain Indian citizenship. This militates against the basic tenets of secularism as enshrined in the Constitution, particularly Articles 14 and 15, which guarantee equality before the law and forbid discrimination on the grounds of religion. BJP's argument is that the permitted religions are minorities who have faced religious persecution in neighboring countries. Therefore, India should take them in on humanitarian grounds. But that can be determined only on a case-by-case basis, not read from a person's religion alone. The truth is, the CAB is an offshoot of the National Register of Citizens NRC exercise in Assam that caused much hardship to the people of that state. In the end, 19.6 lakh people were excluded from the NRC, out of which around 12 lakh were Hindus. Meanwhile, there are ludicrous calls to extend NRC across the country. The Indian Express, in its editorial titled Old in the New, says Gotabaya Rajapaksa's election as president of Sri Lanka was foretold on Easter Sunday this year, when suicide bombers professing loyalty to the Islamic State blew themselves at churches and hotels, killing hundreds of people. That horrific day rekindled Sri Lanka's collective memory of the years of terrorist violence by the LTTE and the long military failure to defeat the Tamil insurgency, until in 2007, when then President Mahinda Rajapaksa gave his brother Gotabaya counterbalance against the Tigers. In 2 years, a freshly armed, retrained and self-believing Sri Lankan army had crushed the LTTE. Gota was seen as the architect of that victory. 10 years later, when Sri Lanka faced another national security crisis, nostalgia for the Rajapaksas touched a new high, especially after it became clear that the national unity government that replaced the Rajapaksa regime in 2015 had failed to prevent the bombings. Even before this, as the president and prime minister fought each other for supremacy, almost from the get-to-go and the work of governance ground to a halt, Rajapaksa's authoritarian ways began to be compared favorably. It was a majoritarian Sinhala Buddhist sentiment, and this is clear from the election results too. Indeed, this is possibly the most ethnically polarized result in Sri Lanka over the last 3 decades, other than the Tamil boycott of the 2005 presidential contest enforced by the LTTE. There is little doubt that Gotabaya is the only new face for Rajapaksa family rule. India, whose relations with Sri Lanka went through a troubled patch during the Mahinda Rajapaksa presidency due to his proximity with China, now faces the challenge of rebuilding ties with the brothers. While doing so, Delhi should not lose sight of the reality that an ethnically divided and unstable Sri Lanka is not in India's interest. The Hindustan Times, in its editorial titled A Tribute to Rajya Sabha at 250, writes, on Monday, the 250th session of the Rajya Sabha (RS) commenced. India's upper house has been a remarkable institution which has played an important and often underrated role in strengthening India's parliamentary democracy as well as Indians' federalism. The idea was that, with its distance from the exigencies and immediate demands of mass electoral politics, the House would serve as a chamber of more informed deliberation where individuals from across political and professional backgrounds would offer their independent and wise inputs into legislation. The idea also was that this would be the voice of the Indian states, where concerns by representatives from distinct regions would add to the depth of unity. Those were the comments from the press, presented to you by the News Services Division of